I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would look me in the eye and call me mediocre. The word cut deeper than any knife ever could. Her voice was cold, sharp, dripping with disgust. "Dad, you've wasted your life in that old house. It's time to let it go." I didn't argue. I just stood there on the porch, watching the for sale sign sway in the wind. That house wasn't just bricks and wood. It was my life. The home where her mother and I built every dream we ever had. But she didn't care. "You'll thank me later," she said, smirking as she waved the real estate papers in my face. A week later, I found out the house sold for $890,000. She didn't even tell me until the deal was done. "I already transferred your share to a retirement account," she said, like she was doing me a favor. My share? That word made me chuckle inside. "You think you own it all?" she snapped. "You didn't even pay for half the renovations, Dad. Mom did." I just smiled, saying nothing. She thought my silence was defeat, but it was patience. The day before she moved out my things, I asked for one last favor. "Before you change the locks, let me open the safe in the basement." She rolled her eyes. "It's that rusty old thing? It's probably full of junk." I nodded slowly, walked downstairs, and placed my hand on the old metal door. It was the same safe I'd installed 25 years ago, the one she'd never seen opened. I spun the combination, each turn echoing in the silent basement. When it clicked open, she crossed her arms. "What, a bunch of old documents?" she said mockingly. Inside were 3 envelopes, one labeled for Emily, her name, one labeled for bank, and one labeled for attorney. I handed her the one with her name. "Read it," I said. She tore it open, smirking, but as her eyes moved over the words, the color drained from her face. "Dad, what is this?" she stammered. The letter read, "Dear Emily, you never asked why your mother's name wasn't on the property deed. When we bought this house, she insisted it stay in my name. For you. This house was meant to be yours one day, after you learned what truly matters. You sold it before you ever asked what it meant to me. But here's the truth. The deed you signed, it wasn't valid. The title was transferred last year to a trust under your name, but it becomes active only after I pass. Until then, you own nothing. I let you believe you had power just to see how you'd use it. Now you know." She looked at me trembling. You tricked me?" she whispered. I smiled softly. "No, Emily, I taught you." And then she screamed, not out of anger, but realization. The sale, the money, the control she thought she had, all of it vanished in that one moment. I turned to walk up the stairs, my old steps slow but steady. Behind me, I heard her crying, the kind of cry that comes when pride breaks and truth seeps in. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence teaches louder than words ever could. That night I sat on the porch again, under the same stars her mother and I once watched. The world felt quiet. My phone buzzed. A message from her. "Dad, I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I smiled, replying only with one line. "Always, Emily. The door's never locked." That night, after Emily's message, I didn't sleep. Her words replayed in my head, short, hesitant, and filled with the kind of guilt I'd never heard in her voice before. The next morning, I brewed 2 cups of coffee, the way her mother used to make it. Strong, slightly bitter, with a hint of vanilla. When Emily arrived, she didn't say anything at first. She just stood at the doorway, her face pale, eyes red. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to run into my arms after scraping her knee. But time changes people. Pride builds walls. Still, I nodded toward the porch chair. "Sit," I said quietly. She sat down, her hands trembling around the coffee cup. "Dad, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought you thought I was holding you back," I interrupted gently. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I wanted a better life.
The house felt like a burden, like a reminder that we were stuck. I leaned back, staring at the sky. That house was never the burden, Emily. The burden was forgetting where we came from. She lowered her head, ashamed. I wanted to invest the money. I thought maybe if I proved I could handle things, you'd finally respect me. I chuckled softly. Respect doesn't come from money. It comes from character. She didn't respond. For a few minutes, the only sound was the wind brushing through the trees. Then she asked, "Why didn't you stop me?" I smiled faintly. "Because some lessons you have to learn the hard way. Your mother used to say that too." Her eyes softened at the mention of her mom. "Do you miss her?" she asked quietly. I swallowed hard. Every single day. Then Emily whispered something I didn't expect. "I found her letter in the safe too, the one addressed to me." I looked at her, surprised. "You opened it?" She nodded. "I did. She wrote that she trusted me to take care of you, that she knew I'd lose myself chasing success, but hoped I'd find my way back to love. Dad, she knew." Her voice broke, and she covered her face. I reached out, placing a hand on hers. "Your mother always saw the truth before anyone else did." For the first time in years, we sat together without bitterness between us. She looked at me and said, "Dad, what if I buy the house back?" I smiled sadly. "You can't. It's not for sale anymore." She frowned. "What do you mean?" I stood and walked toward the edge of the porch. "The trust activated the moment you tried to sell it under false ownership. It's locked now, until I decide otherwise." Her lips parted in disbelief. "So you could have stopped everything?" I turned back to her. "Yes, but I wanted to see your choice. You chose money. Now you can choose redemption." Emily looked down, ashamed. "I'll do anything, Dad. I want to make things right." I nodded. "Then come home. Help me fix what's broken, not the house, but us." For the next few weeks, she came by every morning. We repaired old furniture, cleaned up the garden her mother once tended, and even repainted the living room. Slowly, the laughter that had vanished from our home began to return. One day, as we worked, she found an old photo album. She smiled softly, flipping through pages of birthdays, Christmas mornings, and vacations long gone. "You know," she said, "I barely remember half these moments." I smiled. "That's because you were too busy growing up. I was too busy trying to hold on." She laughed quietly. "I guess we both failed in our own ways." I nodded. "Maybe. But failing isn't the end. Giving up is." That night, after she left, I opened my wife's letter again, the one she had written before she passed. It read, "If Emily ever forgets what love means, remind her not with anger, but with patience. She'll come back when she's ready." I folded the letter, tears welling in my eyes. She was right again. Emily had come back, not for the house, not for the money, but for something far more precious: family. One afternoon, Emily brought over a man I hadn't met before. "Dad, this is Daniel," she said, smiling nervously. "We've been dating for a while." I shook his hand firmly. He looked honest, humble, nothing like the people she used to surround herself with. "Nice to meet you, sir," he said respectfully. "You picked a good one," I told her. She grinned shyly. "I'm trying to do things right this time." Then one day, she surprised me again. "Dad, I want to move back in, if you'll let me." I looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. The door's never been locked. That evening she brought her things and we cooked dinner together, just like old times. As we ate, she looked around the house and said, "You know, I used to think this place was small and dull, but now it feels like peace." I nodded. It was never the house that changed, Emily. It was us. For the first time in years, I saw her truly happy. That night, after she went to bed, I sat outside again under the stars. I whispered to the sky, "We did it, honey. She's home." But deep inside, I knew this story wasn't over yet. The trust had one more secret, something Emily still didn't know. A letter, sealed and hidden in the attic, written by her mother before she died. It held the final truth about who really owned the house, and why. I decided I'd show her that letter when the time was right. Not now. Not yet. She needed to rebuild herself first, to understand that family and forgiveness were worth more than any dollar amount could ever be. As the moon rose higher, I smiled, knowing that for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. My daughter was home, and this time, she wasn't running away from her past. She was learning from it.
Weeks passed, and the house started to feel alive again. The smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of Emily humming in the kitchen, the laughter echoing through the hallway, all the little things I thought were gone forever returned like long-lost friends. I'd catch myself smiling without realizing it, sometimes even tearing up, as I watched her cook her mother's favorite recipe just the way she used to. But behind that peace, there was still something heavy in my heart, the letter hidden in the attic. I had promised myself I'd wait until she was ready, because what that letter contained could change everything. One cold Sunday afternoon, while Emily was cleaning the guest room, she called out, "Dad, what's this old box up here?" My heart stopped for a second. I walked in slowly and saw her holding the small wooden chest I'd kept hidden for years. She smiled innocently. "It was tucked behind the rafters," she said. I froze. She didn't know what was inside yet. "Just some old memories," I said softly, trying to sound casual. But she could always read my tone. She frowned. "Dad, you're hiding something again." I sighed and motioned for her to sit down. She placed the box between us and opened it. There were old photographs, her mother's wedding ring, and a sealed envelope with her mother's handwriting on it. "For Emily, when she's ready." Her hands trembled. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" I took a deep breath. "Because you weren't ready before. Now you are." She stared at the letter for a long time before carefully tearing it open. As she read, the room went silent. Her eyes filled with tears line by line. Her mother's voice, through those words, spoke directly into her soul. The letter said, "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, it means life has already taught you what pride cannot. Your father and I built this house with our hands, but more importantly, with our hearts. It belongs not to him, not to me, but to the love we shared as a family. This house will always be yours, not because of money or ownership, but because of the memories you hold here. Don't let greed blind you again. My last wish is that you take care of your father and never forget, love is the only inheritance worth keeping." Emily's tears fell onto the paper. She looked up at me, her voice cracking. "Dad, she knew everything. Dad, she knew how lost I'd become." I nodded, my throat tight. "Your mother always saw what I couldn't." Emily reached out and hugged me so tightly it almost hurt. "I don't deserve this house," she whispered. I smiled faintly. "Then earn it, Emily. Not by buying it back, but by keeping what it stands for." For the first time, she truly understood what that meant. From that day on, she treated the house differently. She cleaned every corner, restored old pictures, even replanted the rose bushes her mother loved. The home that once felt cold and broken was alive again. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset,
Emily turned to me and said, "Dad, I think I want to create something in Mom's name, a foundation for single mothers, helping them keep their homes." I stared at her stunned. "That's exactly what your mother dreamed of," I said quietly. She smiled through her tears. "Then let's do it together." And we did. We spent months working on it, transforming one part of the house into an office. We called it the Harper Home Project, after her mother's maiden name. We helped families facing foreclosure, offering advice, grants, and a little bit of hope. Every time I saw Emily helping someone, I saw her mother's spirit shining through her. One night, after we'd finished a long day of meetings, I found Emily standing in the living room staring at the framed trust documents. She turned to me and said, "Dad, I think I finally understand why you smiled that day I called you mediocre. You weren't angry. You were waiting for me to grow up." I chuckled softly. "I wasn't waiting for you to grow up. I was waiting for you to look back." She laughed through her tears. "Guess I took long enough." I nodded. The best lessons do. But even as peace returned, there was still something Emily didn't know. The trust had a clause her mother added before she died, one that would soon reveal itself and test her Emily's heart one final time. It wasn't about money or property this time. It was about forgiveness. For the man who had once broken their family apart, her estranged uncle, Michael, the one who disappeared with their savings decades ago, was about to re-enter their lives. The letter in the lawyer's office was set to be opened soon, and when it did, Emily would have to decide whether she could forgive the man who caused their pain or repeat her past mistakes again. I looked at the stars that night, feeling both peace and worry. She had learned so much, but was she ready for the truth that was coming? I wasn't sure. Yet deep down, I believed her mother's final lesson would guide her, just as it had guided me all these years.
The day everything changed again began quietly, like any other morning. The sun filtered softly through the old curtains. Emily was in the kitchen making breakfast, and I was sipping my coffee on the porch when the mail truck pulled up. The driver handed me a thick brown envelope with my lawyer's name stamped on it. My heart skipped a beat. I already knew what it was, the clause her mother had written before she died. It was time. I walked inside and placed the envelope on the table. Emily looked up from the stove. "Who's it from?" "The lawyer," I said softly. She frowned, wiping her hands. "About the foundation?" "Not exactly." She tilted her head. "Then what?" I hesitated. "It's something your mother arranged before she passed." Her face softened. "Can I open it?" I nodded slowly. She tore it open and unfolded the letter inside, reading silently at first, but soon her lips parted in shock. "Dad, what is this?" I stayed quiet. She read aloud, "To my daughter Emily and my husband Robert, if this letter is opened, it means the time has come for forgiveness. Michael Harper has been found. He seeks redemption, not wealth. Help him if you can, for he is part of our story too." Her eyes widened. "Uncle Michael?" She whispered his name like it was a ghost's. I nodded slowly. The name carried years of pain. Michael, her mother's brother, the man who had betrayed us, who'd taken our savings and vanished when Emily was just a child. Her mother never stopped believing he'd one day ask for forgiveness. I never believed he deserved it. Emily put the letter down, her hand shaking. "She wants us to help him?" "That's what it says," I murmured. She took a deep breath. "Do you know where he is?" The lawyer included an address. "He's living 2 towns over, in a small care facility. He's sick." Emily's eyes filled with conflict. After what he did, why would Mom want this? I sighed. Because she believed forgiveness frees the soul, both his and ours. For days, Emily couldn't stop thinking about it. She'd sit by the window late at night, staring out into the dark. One evening, she finally said,
Dad, I want to see him. I looked at her carefully. Are you sure? She nodded firmly. I need to know why he did it. The next morning, we drove in silence through winding country roads until we reached a small, aging care home. The nurse led us down a quiet hallway to a room at the end. When we stepped in, I barely recognized him. Michael looked frail, his hair white, his face lined with regret. His eyes widened when he saw us. "Robert? Emily?" he whispered, voice trembling. I didn't speak. I wanted to hate him, but when I saw the tears forming in his eyes, my anger weakened. Emily stepped forward. "Uncle Michael," she said softly, "Mom left us a letter. She wanted us to forgive you." He looked down, ashamed. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," I said quietly, "but she believed in second chances." He took a shaky breath. "I was young and greedy. I thought I was smarter than everyone. I lost everything. The money, my family, myself. I tried to find you both years ago, but I couldn't face what I'd done." Emily's eyes softened. "Mom always believed you'd come back." He looked at her, tears falling. "She wrote to me once. I never replied. I couldn't bear it." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Emily walked up and placed her hand on him. "You can start now," she said gently. His lips trembled as he whispered, "Thank you." After that day, Michael slowly became part of our lives again. He was weak, but his heart was sincere. Emily would visit him every week, bringing homemade food and stories about the foundation. One day he asked to see the house again. "Just once," he said, "to say goodbye properly." I wasn't sure it was a good idea, but Emily insisted. So, a week later, we brought him home. He stood in front of the porch, his eyes full of memories. "I remember helping you lay those bricks, Robert," he said softly. I nodded. "You were the one who taught me how." He smiled faintly. "And I was the one who betrayed it all." "Not anymore," I said quietly. "You came back." Inside, he sat by the fireplace and stared at the family photos on the wall. "Your mother would be proud," he whispered to Emily. "You became everything she hoped for." Emily smiled through her tears. "She believed in love more than anything." He nodded weakly. "Don't ever lose that." That night, after we drove him back to the care home, I found another letter in the mail from the lawyer. It was the final part of the trust documents. It said that upon Michael's forgiveness being granted, the house ownership would fully transfer to Emily, not as inheritance, but as a gift of legacy. She had completed her mother's last wish. When I told her, she broke down in tears, hugging me tightly. "Dad, I don't deserve this." "Yes, you do," I said softly. "You finally learned what this house was meant to teach you." From that day, Emily wasn't just my daughter. She was the keeper of her mother's dream, of forgiveness, and of everything we once lost. But deep down, I knew one last secret still remained, something I had never told her about the night her mother passed, a truth I had carried alone all these years, a truth that would change how she saw both of us forever.
That night, the wind howled softly through the cracks of the old house, carrying with it whispers of the past. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace, feeling the weight of years pressing down on me. Emily had gone to bed early after a long day at the foundation, but I knew my mind wouldn't rest until the secret I had buried for so long finally found its way to light. I looked up at the photograph on the mantel. Her mother, smiling, the same soft blue eyes Emily had inherited. She looked alive, as if she were waiting for me to finally tell our daughter the truth. The truth about that night. The night everything changed. I remember it clearly as if it happened yesterday. She was in the hospital room, holding my hand, her breathing weak but steady. She smiled through the pain and said, "Robert, when I'm gone, promise me you'll tell Emily the truth when she's ready?" I had nodded, but when the time came, I couldn't. I thought keeping the truth buried would protect Emily, that it would spare her the pain. But now, years later, I realized I'd only been protecting myself. Because that truth, it wasn't just about her mother's death. It was about me. I had made a decision that night that changed both of our lives forever. As I sat there lost in thought, Emily's voice startled me from behind. "Dad, you're awake?" She walked in wearing her robe, eyes sleepy but curious. "Couldn't sleep," I said softly. She sat beside me on the couch. "You've been quiet all evening. Is something wrong?" I took a deep breath. "Emily, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something about your mother." She frowned. "What about her?" I hesitated for a long time, then said, "The night she died, it wasn't peaceful, like I told you." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I looked down at my trembling hands. She had been getting weaker every day. The doctors said there was nothing more they could do. She was in pain, terrible pain, and she made me promise something I never had the courage to admit. Emily's voice shook. "Promise what?" I swallowed hard. "She asked me to let her go." The silence that followed felt endless. Emily stared at me, her face frozen between disbelief and heartbreak. You mean—" I nodded, tears filling my eyes. "She didn't want to keep fighting. She wanted peace. She asked me to stop the machines when she couldn't ask anyone else. I held her hand and did it." Emily covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dad, I thought I was doing the right thing," I whispered. "She was suffering, and she begged me not to let her fade away in agony. But after that night, I couldn't forgive myself. So I built the trust. I kept the house. I told myself it was for you, but deep down, it was for her, to make sure her love never left these walls." Emily broke down sobbing. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I was afraid you'd hate me," I said quietly. She looked at me through tears. "I could never hate you. You did what she wanted. You kept her promise alive." For a long time, we sat in silence, holding each other as the fire crackled beside us. I felt a weight lift off my chest, a weight I had carried for years without realizing how heavy it had become. Emily whispered, "Mom always said you were stronger than you knew." I think she was right. I smiled weakly. Your mother was the strong one. I just followed her heart. She shook her head. No, Dad, you carried it. The next morning, Emily woke up early and went to the garden. She planted new roses beside her mother's old ones. The sunlight hit her hair just right, and for a moment she looked exactly like her mother did all those years ago. She turned to me and said, "You know, Dad, I think she never really left. She's everywhere here, in the wind, in the flowers, in us." I nodded, feeling tears rise again. "She'd be proud of you, Emily."
Of us, Dad, of both of us. But as peaceful as that morning felt, there was still one thing left undone. In my study drawer sat a sealed envelope addressed to Emily, in her mother's handwriting. It was the last letter, the one she wrote after the hospital visit, the one I never had the heart to give her. It contained the final truth, the real reason her mother built the trust, and why she believed the house had to stay in the family forever. I looked at the drawer, hesitant. Should I give it to her now, or wait until she was truly ready? I didn't know. But I could feel time catching up to me. My hands trembled a little more every day. My breaths came slower. I knew I didn't have forever. And when the time came, that letter would be her final lesson, the one that would change how she saw her mother, me, and everything we'd ever built together.
The morning was calm, too calm, like the kind of silence that comes before a storm. I sat by my study window, watching the sunlight slip through the trees, glowing gold against the leaves. It was peaceful but heavy, because I knew what was waiting inside that drawer. The letter. The last piece of her mother's truth. The one thing I'd promised to give Emily when the time was right. I had held it for years, through grief and guilt, waiting for her to grow strong enough to face what was written inside. Now, as I watched her watering the roses outside, smiling softly at the blossoms that grew where her mother once knelt, I knew the moment had come. I reached into the drawer, took the old envelope out, and felt my heart tremble. It was sealed with the same wax her mother had used for special letters, a tiny imprint of a rose on red wax. I turned it over and whispered, "It's time." When Emily came inside, she noticed the letter in my hand instantly. "Dad, what's that?" "Something your mother wanted you to have when you were ready," I said quietly. She froze, then slowly sat across from me. Her hands shook as she took it. I could see the fear and curiosity mixing in her eyes. She broke the seal and began to read. The first line made her gasp. "My dearest Emily, if you are holding this letter, it means you finally understand what love and loss truly mean. But there is one more truth I could never tell you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted you to learn it from life itself." She looked at me briefly before continuing. "You've always believed your father and I built this home together from savings and hard work. That's only half true. The truth is, this house was never ours to begin with. It was a gift from someone you've never met." Emily frowned, confused. "What does that mean?" I stayed silent, letting her read on. "Before you were born, your father had a brother, Samuel. He was your uncle by blood. But unlike Michael, he was kind, generous, and quiet. He passed away before you were old enough to remember. He left behind this house in his will, hoping it would always stay in our family. I promised him I would protect it and keep it a place of love." Emily's eyes widened. "Dad, you never told me you had another brother." I nodded slowly. "I didn't think it mattered anymore. But your mother never forgot. She made the trust to honor him, to make sure the love he left behind never disappeared." She turned back to the letter, reading faster now. "If ever you find this letter, know that this home carries the love of 3 souls, not just mine and your father's, but your uncle's too. He gave us a home when we had nothing, and your father gave it life when grief took me away. If you ever feel lost, remember, you're a living proof that love outlives loss." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She put the letter down and whispered, "All these years, I thought this house was just a symbol of our family.
But it's more than that. It's a legacy. I nodded, my voice trembling. Your mother wanted you to know that love doesn't end when people leave. It passes on, through walls, through memories, through you. Emily stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the roses swaying in the sunlight. Uncle Samuel gave us the house. Mom built it into a home. You turned it into a lesson. And now it's my turn. I smiled faintly. Your turn? She turned to me with a look of determination I hadn't seen in years. Yes, I'm going to expand the foundation. I'll name the new branch after him, the Samuel Home Initiative. It'll help veterans and families who lost everything rebuild their homes, just like he helped us. My heart swelled with pride. I could barely speak. He would have loved that. She smiled through her tears. Mom would too. Over the next few months, Emily worked tirelessly to bring that dream to life. She met with donors, volunteers, and city officials. People admired her passion. She spoke not of charity, but of legacy. She told everyone the story of her family. Not the version filled with pain and betrayal, but the one built on forgiveness and love. And through it all, I watched her grow into someone her mother would have been proud of. But inside me, a quiet ache remained. I knew I was nearing my end. My strength was fading day by day. I didn't tell Emily. She had too much to carry already. One evening, she came home late from a meeting and found me sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket. She smiled tiredly. You're still up? Waiting for you, I said softly. Big day? She nodded. We finally got the grant, Dad. We can start building next month. I smiled, though my chest felt heavy. That's wonderful, sweetheart. She sat beside me and rested her head on my shoulder. You know, none of this wouldn't have happened without you. I chuckled weakly. That's not true. It happened because you found your heart again. She looked up at the stars and whispered, Do you think Mom's proud of us? I know she is, I said, closing my eyes. But deep down, I wondered if I'd live long enough to see her project come to life. As the night grew colder, I could feel her mother's presence in the wind, soft and comforting, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what was coming. Because Emily was ready. She had become everything we hoped for and more. Yet fate still had one last twist waiting. Something hidden not in the past, but in the future. Something that would test Emily's strength one final time and make her question everything she thought she knew about her mother's death and the legacy she carried.
The days moved slower after that night. The air in the house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves knew time was running out for me. I watched Emily every morning as she prepared for her meetings, her hair tied neatly, her eyes filled with purpose. She had become everything her mother dreamed of, a strong, kind woman who led with compassion. But behind her smile, I saw the same thing that once haunted me: fear. The fear of losing someone again. She tried to hide it, but a parent always knows. One afternoon, she came home early. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "Dad," she said quietly, "the foundation got a strange email today. It was from someone named Daniel Hart. He claims he's the real owner of this property." My heart skipped a beat. What? He sent documents, old deeds, signatures, dates. He says our Uncle Samuel sold the property years before his death. Emily's voice cracked. Is it true?
I froze for a moment, my mind racing back decades, back to a time I'd buried deep in guilt. I took a long breath. "Sit down, Emily. There's something I never told you." She sat across from me, eyes wide, heart pounding. "Before your mother and I married, I was in trouble. I'd lost my job, our bills were piling up, and I didn't know how to keep us afloat. Samuel, your uncle, offered to help. He said he'd transfer the deed to me temporarily so I could use it as collateral for a business loan. He trusted me completely. But I forged his signature on a second document, making the house ours permanently." Emily's face turned white. "Dad, you—" I nodded slowly, tears in my eyes. I betrayed his trust. I planned to tell him later to make it right, but he died before I could. He never knew what I'd done. For a long moment, Emily said nothing. The silence felt like punishment. She stood up, walked to the window, and whispered, "So this house, it was never ours." "No," I said softly. "It was his gift, a gift I stole." She turned around, her eyes filled with pain and confusion. "Then the letter Mom wrote, it wasn't the full truth." "She found out," I said, voice trembling, "a few months before she died. She forgave me, but she made me promise never to tell you until you were strong enough to understand." Emily sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. "All this time, I thought you were the victim. I thought Mom's secret was about love, but it was about forgiveness." Tears burned my eyes. Yes. She believed that love without forgiveness dies quietly. She wanted you to see both sides, to know that good people can make terrible mistakes and still find redemption. Emily looked up slowly, her voice cracking. "What about this Daniel guy? If he has proof?" I nodded. "Then maybe it's time to face what I ran from." The next week, we met Daniel in a small law office downtown. He was a tall, calm man in his 60s with Samuel's same piercing blue eyes. The moment he walked in, I knew he was family. "Mr. Hart," I said shakily, "I owe you more than an apology." He studied me silently, then handed Emily a folder. "Your uncle was my father. When he passed, our family moved abroad. We found these papers recently while settling his estate. That's when I realized someone had altered the property records." Emily's voice trembled. "We had no idea." Daniel smiled faintly. "I believe you. I've read your foundation proposal. I know you're honoring Samuel's name. Your mother's letter, it was beautiful. She understood what family means." He turned to me. "I don't want the house back, but I do want the truth recorded properly. I want Samuel's name restored as the original owner. And I want to be part of what Emily is building." Emily's eyes widened. You want to join us?" He nodded. "Samuel believed in second chances. I think this is one." For the first time in years, I felt the weight in my chest ease. I extended my hand, and Daniel took it firmly. That handshake felt like forgiveness made real. As months passed, Daniel became like the uncle Emily never had. He brought stories of Samuel's life, photos, letters, old journals. She learned how deeply her uncle loved this land, how he dreamed of turning it into a shelter long before she ever thought of the Samuel Home Initiative. One night, as we sat around the fireplace, Emily showed us the final design of the new community center. She said, "This will be Samuel's Hall, a place for families to rebuild, just like ours once did." Daniel smiled and said softly, "He would have loved this." But even in that moment of peace, I knew something Emily didn't. My heart was failing fast. I could feel it in every breath, like a clock winding down. I started writing her a letter that night, just like her mother once did. I wrote, "My dearest Emily, by the time you read this, you'll have built something that will outlive us all. But there's one more truth you should know. One I never told anyone, not even your mother." As I wrote those words, my hand shook, tears falling onto the page. Because the secret I was about to confess wasn't about guilt or money. It was about the real reason Samuel left the house to me in the first place. A truth that would change everything Emily believed about her family, her mother, and herself.
The night was still and quiet, the kind that feels too peaceful to be real. The old clock on the wall ticked softly, each sound echoing like a countdown. I sat at my desk, pen trembling in my hand, the paper before me illuminated by the dim light of my lamp. My breath came slow and shallow. I could feel the ache in my chest, the same dull, warning pain that had been with me for weeks. But tonight it was heavier, final. I had no fear, only a desperate need to finish the words that needed to be said. I began to write. "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, then I'm no longer with you. But I am not gone. You'll find me in every rose that blooms in the garden, your mother's laughter and the wind, and the warmth that fills this home you rebuilt with love. There is something you must know before you move forward, a truth I carried all my life and one I could never tell you until I was gone." My hand paused, my eyes closing for a moment as I gathered my strength. "You know now that I betrayed my brother Samuel once, but there's more to that story. When I told you he gave us this house, I only told you part of why he did it. He didn't just give me this home because he was generous. He gave it to me because he couldn't give it to her." I stopped, my throat tightening. The memory was so old, yet so vivid. I wrote, "Before I met your mother, Samuel loved her first." The words looked heavy, wrong, even cruel on the page, but they were true. I could still remember that night, the rain falling hard, the letter Samuel left on the kitchen table before leaving town. Your mother had told me everything after we married. She said Samuel and she had known each other for years. They were young, hopeful, and deeply in love. But Samuel was sick even then, a heart condition that doctors said would shorten his life. He wanted her to have a future, a family, so he introduced me to her. I never knew his feelings until later, after he was gone. And when he left me the house, it wasn't just out of kindness. It was his way of making sure the woman he loved would always be safe. I wrote through tears now. "Your mother married me, but a part of her heart always belonged to him. She never betrayed me, but she never stopped carrying his memory either. And when you were born, Emily, Samuel saw you once, only once, and he told me something I never forgot. He said,
She has her mother's eyes and my soul." At the time, I thought he meant it poetically, but years later, after his passing, your mother told me the truth. I stopped, feeling my heart clench. I could almost hear my late wife's voice whispering, soft and trembling, "Michael, she deserves to know someday." I wrote the words that would change everything. "Samuel was your biological father, Emily." My hand nearly slipped from my fingers. I took a deep breath, wiping away the tears blurring my vision. "I raised you as my own, not because I had to, but because I loved you with every piece of my soul. You were the greatest gift of both our lives, and the living proof of our love, forgiveness, and sacrifice." I let the ink dry on the page, watching as a single tear fell and smudged the word love. My hand was growing weaker. The pain had moved deeper now. I placed the letter in an envelope, sealed it with trembling fingers, and wrote her name on it. Emily Rose Hart. It felt right. Her full name, for the first time carrying the truth of who she really was. I placed the letter inside the wooden box beside her mother's things, the same box where her mother's letter once waited for her. And as the clock struck midnight, I whispered, "Now she'll finally know." Then I looked toward the photo of my wife and Samuel, taken before I ever met her. Both smiling, both young, full of life. And I smiled too, because at last I had made peace with it all. The next morning, Emily found me asleep in the chair, my hand resting on the sealed envelope. She thought I was resting, until she touched my arm and realized I was gone. She didn't cry right away. She just sat there, holding my hand, feeling how cold it was, how still. Then she saw the envelope. She opened it slowly, and as her eyes moved across the words, the world around her seemed to fade. She read everything, the truth about her parents, her uncle, her real father. Every emotion, shock, grief, confusion, rushed through her all at once. But then something beautiful happened. She didn't break. Instead, she smiled through her tears and whispered, "You never stopped being my father." She placed her hand on my shoulder and said softly, "Thank you for loving me anyway." In the days that followed, she arranged a quiet funeral. No grand speeches, no press, just family and close friends. Daniel stood beside her, holding the letter with trembling hands. When he finished reading it, he looked at Emily and said, "That makes you my sister." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with peace. "It makes us family, and that's all that matters." Months passed. The Samuel Home Initiative grew faster than anyone expected. New homes were built, new lives were restored, and at the heart of it all stood the Hall, Samuel's Hall, a beautiful glass and stone building overlooking the garden where roses bloomed year-round. On the front wall, etched into marble, were 3 names: Samuel Hart, Michael Turner, and Grace Turner, her mother's name. Beneath them, a single line read, "Love outlives loss." Every morning, Emily visited the garden. She'd bring a cup of coffee, stand by the roses, and whisper, "Good morning, Dad." Sometimes she'd talk to the air as if someone were there, because in her heart she knew they were. She often thought about how strange life was, how betrayal could lead to forgiveness, how secrets could lead to healing. And one day, as she stood there watching the sunrise, she felt a soft breeze pass by. The roses swayed gently, and for a moment she heard 3 voices: the deep calm of Samuel, the warm strength of Michael, and the tender laugh of her mother. And in that moment, she knew their love had finally come full circle. It wasn't about who owned the house, or who was right or wrong. It was about the legacy they left behind.
a legacy of love, forgiveness, and truth. And as the wind whispered through the roses, Emily closed her eyes and smiled, because she finally understood what her father had meant all along. You can lose everything in this life: your house, your name, your past. But if you keep love alive, you never truly lose anything at all.